All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Look, if you're building digital products today, you already know the landscape is, well, completely unforgiving. Speed to market, managing your runway, reaching users literally everywhere at the same time, these aren't just ambitious goals anymore. They're strict, non-negotiable requirements for survival. Move too slowly, your competitor eats your lunch. Burn too much cash on engineering overhead, you run out of runway. So today, we're unpacking the strategic power of cross-platform development. We'll be drawing on the proven engineering frameworks used by industry leaders like Sparkout Tech to show you exactly how modern businesses are fundamentally rethinking their software architecture to build smarter, faster, and honestly, infinitely more efficiently.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the multi-platform challenge, move into why you should choose cross-platform, break down the engineering process, look at cross-platform across various industries, and finish up with a real-world success story featuring FarmSend.
Okay, part 1, the multi-platform challenge, or as I like to call it, the app development headache.
If you've ever managed an app build, or even just watched a product team frantically try to hit a deadline, you know the headache I'm talking about. So, what's your biggest hurdle? Is it the astronomical cost of hiring completely separate iOS and Android teams? Historically, if you wanted to reach everyone in the mobile market, you basically had to build everything twice. You needed one highly specialized team coding in Swift for Apple devices, and then another entirely separate team coding in Kotlin or Java for Android. That means you're dealing with 2 separate product backlogs, double the bugs, double the management meetings, and essentially double the budget. It is a logistical nightmare that slows your time to market to an absolute crawl. Plus, you almost always run into feature disparity, where your Android users are waiting weeks to get a feature that your iOS users are already enjoying. It's just a highly inefficient way to scale a business.
But there's a fix. The solution is a unified codebase for mobile, web, and desktop. Think of it kind of like writing a brilliantly complex book once, and then having a framework magically translate it into every single language simultaneously. Now, it's absolutely crucial to understand why this is so much more powerful today than it was, say, 5 or 10 years ago. Back then, cross-platform usually just meant wrapping a clunky, slow website inside a mobile app shell. Honestly, it felt terrible to use. But today, modern frameworks don't just wrap web pages. They actually compile your single code base down into native machine code. The processor on your user's phone literally cannot tell the difference between this and an app built the old-fashioned, wildly expensive way. You get true native performance, butterly smooth animations, full hardware access, the whole shebang, all from one single source of truth.
Moving on to part 2, why choose cross-platform? Let's talk about eliminating that double effort.
The contrast really is night and day when you look at how resources get allocated. Traditional native development, it's a tangled web of fragmented teams, slow deployments, and incredibly high overhead. You're constantly pulling your hair out trying to keep 2 distinct engineering cultures synchronized. But when you adopt a cross-platform approach, you completely flip the script. You streamline your entire operation into a single, highly focused team operating from one code base. This lets you launch like a rocket while drastically slashing your budget. It literally transforms your engineering department from a massive cost center into an agile, highly responsive asset.
Let's unpack the real-world advantages of this shift, because they are huge. By leveraging cutting-edge frameworks, think Flutter or React Native, engineering teams at places like Sparkout Tech are delivering apps that feel 100% native. You get ultimate code reusability. We're talking about often sharing upwards of 90% of your code across iOS, Android, and the web. That immediately grants you a broader market reach because, you can launch everywhere on day one. But the real magic? That happens during maintenance. Imagine discovering a critical, app-breaking bug on a Friday afternoon. With traditional native development, you're frantically coordinating 2 teams to fix and test the issue twice. With cross-platform, you patch it once, push the update, and it seamlessly deploys across all platforms simultaneously. You are radically accelerating your deployment cycles and permanently lowering your total cost of ownership. It's a total game changer.
All right, part 3, the engineering process. Here's what a streamlined life cycle looks like. So how exactly does a specialized development partner actually pull off this highly technical feat? Well, they condense what's traditionally a messy, disjointed life cycle into a really tight 5-stage progression. It kicks off with strategy and UI/UX. The main focus here is designing responsive interfaces that adapt perfectly whether your user is holding a massive tablet or a tiny smartphone. Then comes the architecture phase. This is where experts lay the foundation and build that singular, unified code base, focusing heavily on scalable state management. Step 3 is API integration.
This is where the app really comes to life, connecting securely to cloud services, databases, and third-party tools for real-time data sync. Stage 4 is where the efficiency really proves itself: cross-platform testing. Instead of running separate QA teams, automated testing pipelines verify native-like performance across virtual device farms that represent hundreds of different phone models. And finally, deployment and support ensures a smooth, simultaneous rollout to both the Apple App Store and Google Play Store, ready to scale effortlessly as your user base explodes.
Now for part 4, cross-platform across industries, one code, any sector.
It's genuinely fascinating how this unified approach adapts to completely different, highly regulated business logic. Now, you might be thinking, cross-platform is only good for simple, lightweight apps, right? Actually, the reality is entirely different. In e-commerce, it's powering complex, unified shopping experiences with live inventory sync and highly localized payment gateways. Over in healthcare, this technology is trusted to drive HIPAA-compliant patient portals, managing secure data enclaves and cross-device electronic medical records without ever compromising patient privacy. In the fintech space, it effortlessly handles the heavy computational lifting of complex encryption, biometric logins, and seamless KYC onboarding. And for travel, it manages smart itineraries, offline data caching, and background GPS services. The core underlying cross-platform framework stays exactly the same. It's only your specific, complex business logic that changes to suit the industry.
Finally, part 5. Let's look at some real-world success, FarmZen and supply chain disruption.
Let's ground all this technical theory in some pretty staggering real-world data. We're talking about the $5.6 trillion agricultural supply chain. Now, historically, this industry was fundamentally broken, just weighed down by endless layers of middlemen, extracting value at every single step. But by partnering with Sparkout Tech to build a custom Web3-enabled cross-platform ecosystem, FarmSense successfully eliminated a massive 90% of the traditional middleman margin. 90%! They used one unified platform to connect global buyers directly to local farmers, permanently removing the friction and those hugely inflated costs of legacy intermediaries. And by bypassing those intermediaries, they didn't just save a few bucks on overhead. They drove a massive 300% profit margin lift directly back into the pockets of the agricultural producers. I mean, think about why this specific technology choice was so absolutely crucial. Because they deployed a highly optimized cross-platform application, a farmer in a remote region could access the network on whatever cheap legacy Android smartphone they happen to have in the field. Meanwhile, a wholesale buyer in a major city could access the exact same network via an iOS app or a desktop web dashboard. The technology directly translated into life-changing financial empowerment, purely because it was accessible to everyone, everywhere.
And to prove just how immensely scalable this single codebase architecture is, they've already onboarded over 200,000 verified farmers. You simply cannot hit viral adoption numbers like that in rural demographics if your app only works perfectly on the newest iPhone, or if your engineering team is constantly bogged down battling version control issues between two different development tracks. Cross-platform completely removed the hardware barrier. It allowed FarmSense to scale rapidly and reliably with total confidence that the experience would remain stable regardless of the user's device.
As FarmSense founder Jörg Schrusti notes, this isn't just about software functioning correctly. It's about deploying technology that actively dismantles barriers. He pointed out that the platform thoroughly understood their complex economics, dismantled the intermediaries, and actually gave power back to the farmers. That right there is the ultimate promise of removing technological friction. It frees up resources to solve actual, real-world human problems.
Which brings us to a final thought. If you can write your code once, deploy it everywhere effortlessly, achieve true native performance, and drastically slash your development costs, well, your only limit is your ambition. We've seen how this strategy transformed agriculture, fintech, and healthcare. So, with the massive, expensive barriers of multi-platform development totally removed from the equation, what industry will you disrupt next? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope you're leaving today with a clear structural blueprint for the future of scalable business technology.